This is a mini wrap up of 3 books that I've read recently within the month of October. But despite not being haven't uploaded in 2 months, I have been reading. But I'm just gonna make this a mini thing. So the first book that I read was The Baddest by Trina, Katrina Taylor, Katrina Taylor. Yes, we're talking about the female rapper Trina. Now this might be showing my age, and I'm sure it is, but I don't care because hopefully I don't look it. But Trina is my favorite female rapper of all times. I had no business. Me and my cousins and my sister, we had no business listening to Lil Kim and Trina back in the day. But child, I was listening to Trina back in the day and did not care. I remember driving to school listening to her song 69 Ways. But we're going to leave that on the side, okay? That ain't the purpose of us being here. So, yeah, she's my favorite rapper. I always loved her raspy voice, and I love her style of rapping because it sounds like somebody getting cussed out. I did that, and I like that. I like that. So, she released her memoir early in the early part of October. And I didn't know it came out until I seen her do an interview, and I was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe she got a book out." And me as a reader, of course, I ran and got the book, and I did enjoy this book. I did enjoy looking at some of the insights of her life, particularly from her upbringing in Miami. I didn't know that she was featured in one of Luke's videos before. I actually had to stop and go and look up that video as a teenager. She was and see her face. And I was like, oh my God, that was baby Trina back then. But if y'all don't know Luke, then, just, I'm sorry. But my point is that still, I really did enjoy this book. And another area within her story that I enjoy is how she spoke about each of her different albums. I think I got them all her Atlantic release albums. I think it's about 6 or 7 of them. Last one I bought was in 2010, and that was amazing. So after she left Atlantic Records and Slip and Slide Records, which she did address here, I kind of, when they started going independent and doing things like mixtapes and stuff, rappers or whatnot and artists, I kind of lose focus on where they are. But the point is that I enjoyed her giving not step by step, but giving her bit of thoughts or where she was mentally in terms of each of the different albums that she put together. Like, I like the fact that at her first album, she was really just trying to put it together based off of what the record label wanted from her, which is all that cussing and just carrying on. And then I love how in her third album, she wanted to promote much more of the glamour that she received from being famous and the things that, the doors that were open for her. So I really enjoyed that part. But another area I loved is much more of her personal life. I do recall her brother being killed. I do recall her mother passing away, but I did not know that her niece was murdered as well. There was several passages in this book that, when it comes to death, her family members passing away, that resonated so much with me. And unfortunately, I did not bring my notebook because I wrote it down. But the feeling that she expressed after her mother passing away was that I don't have it I'm paraphrasing here, but the point is that she was saying that after her mother passed away, she stopped believing in anything. And that right there hit home with me, because after someone I loved as a family member so dearly, so incredibly dearly passed away, I felt that same thing. I remember walking around thinking to myself, like, I don't believe in this person has died and passed away and or not. And it's like, I don't believe in anything. Like, what is there left to believe in? How do you see your life going forward with this individual missing? Someone who you've always leaned on, who you've always been in the presence of, who you've laughed with, maybe even cried with, hugged, shared moments with, gotten frustrated with, all together. And you are set to keep moving forward in your life, but you don't know how to you don't know how to see your life going forward. You lose sight of what you believe in. So that really resonated with me in this book. And I have to say that, with that being one of the few closing parts of the book, that it just sold it all up for me. So I did enjoy reading The Baddest. So all you Trina fans out there, which I don't know, like I said, they might be showing my age, but I don't care, because I've always loved Trina. And you can pretty much ask anybody who know me, know that I have. So it was great to read that. And the next book that I read was Fear the Dark by Gar Anthony Haywood. This is the first book in his Aaron Gunner private investigator mystery series, Black Private Investigator. It predates Harbaugh, by the way. It predates Walter Mosley's Easy Rawlins series. I've read two other books by him, which is part of his Louder Milk duology. I mentioned them before in the past couple of years before, but this is my first time reading his Aaron Gunner series, and this has to do with Aaron Gunner being tapped on the shoulder because he's struggling as in this position in which he was a former cop turned private investigator, but that wasn't lucrative, so he became an electrician who does private investigative work on the side. But he is asked by this lady whose brother has recently been shot and killed by this white man in this bar to investigate her brother's death. And this leads Aaron into this web of, if you can kind of envision it, this web of the political angle of a white individual because trying to gather up his constituency, the narrative of how the streets are, as well as this minor black militia who might just be playing into the hands of being described or seen as the threat. You know, the what is that? If you would just leave it on that note, I'm going to tell you this. What Mr. Haywood was speaking of in here is exactly precisely what is going on in our current political society here in America. It's the current thing. It's the threat. You know, they're coming. They're going to take all of this. That same hysteria, that same threatening tone, and just all of that was duly expressed here, and I loved it. It was both gratifying to get into that piece of commentary as the author, you know, addressed it through the character of Aaron, who was one of these individuals who was not led so much with the gun, but led so much more with the thought, who could see and perceive how certain consequences of the black militia would make towards their detriment at the end. And I know that's kind of being very wonky, but with that being said, I do encourage people to read that to see what I mean by that, because, you know, it's very much still, unfortunately, given that this was published in 1988, reflective of what's happening today. And that was the joy that I got out of reading Fear the Dark. So Fear the Dark was on my list that I finally read. I bought this copy a few years ago because it was hard to find. So I'm encouraging you to read it, but it is fairly hard to find. But I'm sure you can get it from eBay or something. But Fear the Dark, the first Aaron Gunner series, is definitely highly recommended. I read this book in 2 days. I mean, we were talking about decaf coffee and just covers, silk sheets, and comforters. So the next book that I ended up reading, which is the last book that I finished reading recently, was Time's Undoing by Cheryl A. Head. This was a book that was a huge craving the minute I saw it at the library, like probably like last year maybe. It was like one that I really want to read. Now I did try to read her Charlie mystery series featuring a black private investigator a couple of years ago. I still have the first book in that series, but I didn't finish it because some narratives I just can't. Well, it's not so much the narratives; it's the writing style. I beg for more details a lot of times, and I think that was the issue that I had there. But this is my first foray into Cheryl Head, from beginning of her novel to the end, and this is outside of that series, but it has to do with this lady named Megan McKenzie, who is a newspaper writer, who is going to go down to Birmingham, Alabama from Detroit, I believe, to investigate the passing or murder of her great-grandfather. There is a shroud of mystery behind not only his existence, but also his death. And so within this book, we are carrying not only Megan's perspective as she traverses going through various newspaper offices in Birmingham, talking to different people of the church, trying to pull up the past, you know, going to different police stations, trying to just ravel up every bit of information she can about her great-grandfather and his time in Birmingham during his particular period. So we're looking at her perspective, and then we're switching back to 1929, looking through his specific perspective in him moving to Birmingham as a carpenter, him raising his daughter, him being with his wife, and the unfortunate subsequent uh, train of events that led to his eventual murder on the side of the road. Which you don't know exactly how he was murdered. You just know that it happened, and it carries. You have to carry yourself throughout the whole book to get to that particular piece. And when I say that, I would say that in the sense that that was kind of the driving reason why I kept reading this book, is because I wanted to know exactly what happened to him, even though I knew it was going to be horrific. But outside of that, the story was fairly okay. But I think that there were some elements in it that I could do without. And a lot of that was present within the perspective of Mackenzie, or excuse me, Megan Mackenzie. Um, the immediate adjective that comes to mind is that there was a touch of corniness in that area. Okay, there was a touch of corniness. Um, there was a romance. There was a romance in this book, and there was a lot of sending of roses interspersed within her investigation, making plans to eat dinner, coming over with pizza, going to the gym together, and then she has another friend that a budding friendship that she makes within Birmingham, who is like, yeah, girl, go ahead, do it, girl. I was just like, I don't know. That really, it didn't sour that particular narrative, but when you contrast it with that darkness of her great grandfather's perspective, it was just like, I feel like that's where all the meaningful bits were, that I personally wanted to explore, especially given the time period. So that was rough, and I think that also when it came to Megan's perspective, it was just like a web, a string of her, trying to get to the bottom of what happened to him through various methods of, researching, visiting police stations, going into file cabinets in people's basements, speaking to people in the church. After a while, I was just like, I can't track any of this. Like, it's that confusing. I can't track any of this. And I felt like that by the end, everything should have been a lot clearer than it was initially perceived to be. It felt almost like she should have had access to everything. Like, that portion of her doing the investigative work and maybe even procedural work for investigating her great grandfather's death seemed like it was just a fluff. It was filler. It was fluff. It was, the right word is superfluous. Actually, that's the word that I'm looking for. I just feel like it could have been trimmed down a lot. But at the end of the day, I did fairly enjoy the book. Like I said, I was much more pulled, or was gravitating much more towards the perspective of her great grandfather and those very specific chapters detailing his life. That's where the great stuff happened for me. What I almost wish that the author did instead was took his chapters and formulated them into like a framed narrative, that Megan experiences as she went along with her investigation, instead of them being completely outside of her know-all. That I feel like would have been kind of much more pleasing to me to have witnessed it that way, at least to help out her particular story thread. So yeah, Time's Undoing, it was pretty fun. It was pretty decent. It was pretty decent. I think another thing is that it, given that this author's original work or previous work is hardboiled private investigative work, this is a much more this is a heavy topic for her to get into with Time's Undoings, but it did lack that sort of figurative or prose and language that you would assume probably will be in this work, given that it's much more a literary effort. And while some people may be put off by that, me personally, I didn't really find it troubling at all. I thought that was fine without. The story really did tell itself as it was. That's extra adjective and adverb wasn't completely necessary to get the point across, because like I said, to me personally, those episodes featuring her great grandfather were compelling within themselves as they were being told. And there is a bit of a paranormal ghostly element to it, or just like a note of it. That's another area in which I wish that the story was told with the frame narrative instead. Maybe like her accessing his journal or whatever from the past, and the purpose of it is for the journals to converge into who was the people who murdered him in some way, at that eventuality. But yeah, that was it. So now that's it. That's all. I just want to talk about those books. I kind of want to do a February TBR, so I might do that next, and we'll just be on the lookout for it. I'm waiting for my copy of Tracy Clark's Echo to come in, but that won't be until Friday. And I think that what I want to do for the remainder of the year is to try to catch up on reading all the 2024 releases that I missed within the third and fourth quarter here that we're going into. I think something like that. But anyway, that's it. If you read any of these books, please let me know down below. And thank you for tuning in, and see y'all next time. What time is it? Yeah, it's time to go do something else.